welcome back to class, everybody. Today we are going to talk about some of the composition techniques used in the early 20th century by composers like Stravinsky and Bartók, Prokofiev, some fun composers. So let's hop to it. So in this chapter, you're going to be introduced to a few different systems of composition that composers would use to create some of these crazy scores that we hear in the 20th century. So the early 20th century specifically refers to the time between about 1900 and the beginning of World War II. So that would be, and this is in Europe, World War II, not in the United States. So approximately 1900 to about 1935, and probably just after World War II, 1945. So that's what we consider the early 20th century. So basically the space of time between the wars and at the turn of the century and the last World War. So what you're going to hear, two styles emerge that are in complete contrast to Impressionism, and that is Primitivism and Neoclassicism. And the two composers that we're really going to focus on are a composer named Igor Stravinsky and Bartók. So they're both definitely purveyors of primitivism, and we'll see how they use different styles of composition to achieve sort of this primitive sound. Both composers actually, so Stravinsky is all over the place. He's also known for composing in the neoclassical style. So neoclassicism just refers to, and this is also in the early 20th century, it refers to composers who wanted to return to the classical values of symmetry and balance while maintaining more contemporary tonal materials. So they'd still use the same tonal techniques, so crazy chords, cluster chords, polytonality, but they would use it in a very classical way. So their form is very classical. So that just gives you an idea. Primitive music, it's just in complete contrast to Impressionism. It appeals to that lizard side of your brain. You're going to hear driving rhythms, sharp percussive effects, usually simple, clearly defined melodies. Usually it's derived from folk music, those melodies. And we get two examples of this are Bartók's Allegro Barbaro, and then the super infamous Rite of Spring by Stravinsky. So the Rite of Spring is a ballet. It was commissioned by the Ballet Russe, which is a Russian ballet company that was in Paris. And they commissioned Stravinsky to write this insane piece. And when it premiered at the ballet, it actually caused a riot. And Debussy was in the audience and talked about being hit in the head with someone's shoe. And so I'm going to actually post some cool links of interviews of Stravinsky talking about the Rite of Spring and the composition of it. And also, there's a really, really excellent reproduction. The Joffrey Ballet in the 80s went back and realized that a lot of these people had originally been involved with the Rite of Spring were on their way out, very elderly. So they tracked all these ballerinas down and found out what the costumes looked like, what exactly the choreography looked like, and then they completely recreated it. So, and I've got a link to all of those. So definitely watch them. We'll watch a little bit of it in class on Monday too, because it's really cool to see. And yeah, also side note, just a little piece of trivia: Stravinsky totally having an affair with Coco Chanel Coco Chanel of Chanel fame, while he was writing The Rite of Spring. So there you go. So let's talk about some of these composition techniques. So our first technique is pandiatonicism. It's kind of a crazy word to say. So, and basically it's use of the tones of a diatonic scale in such a way that each tone is stripped of its traditional function. All right, so it doesn't create a clear chord. In this first general chord that we can call something that is a chord, we've got G, D, F, and A. So G, D, F, A, right? Here's our B, here's a C, here's a D, F, C. So you've basically got a chord that's G, B, D, F, A, C. And so it's hard to determine what any of these function as, all right? Technically, you could sort of call it a ninth, but it's so sort of obscure that, that we call it pandiatonicism. All right? Our next sort of method is even more clear. It's called polytonality. So all polytonality is that one part is going to be in one key, and the other part is going to be in a completely different key. So right hand, C major, left hand, G flat major.
So 16.2 shows polytonality. So polytonality is just the use of two or more tonalities at the same time. So you can see 16.2, your top hand is in C major, right? This is just first inversion, C major. And then the bottom hand is in G flat major, right? Just first inversion again. And so you're actually playing both of these at the same time. So you've got, so you're going to have both C major and G flat major going on at the same time. And that's all polytonality is.
Our next technique is dual modality. Or I should say in polytonality, you get a lot of polytonality in the rite of spring. It's very cool. So dual modality, we see this in Bartók. So basically it's simultaneous use of both major and minor at the same time. So it could be a major and minor diatonic scale. It could be a mode. So it could be Dorian or Lydian or something like that. So you're going to be basically using major and minor at the same time. So that's called dual modality. So we see this in this little piece by Bartók. And it's literally called major and minor. So as you can see, right here, we're in the top hand, right? The right hand is in minor, F or Dorian minor, depending on how you finish off the scale. And then the left hand, the bottom part, is going to be in sort of a C major / Lydian mode. They're both starting both of these in F. So they're calling it Dorian and Lydian. If you were to analyze it as a diatonic scale, you'd be in F minor and C major here. So it's basically just playing both of those on top of each other at the same time.
So figure 16.3 is an example of dual modality. Dual modality means that you're going to play both major and minor simultaneously. So you can see 16.3 from this Bartók major and minor from Microcosmos. You're in C major in your right hand, or in your left hand, sorry, in the bottom hand. Whereas in the right hand, the top hand, you're going to be in F minor. Okay? So this first melody is based on the treble clef notes in actually technically Dorian mode. So, and our bass clef notes are in technically Lydian major. They both start on F. One is technically Dorian, one is Lydian. Or you could think about it in terms of major and minor. So when you put them together, you have
The shifted tonality is going to just basically be a sudden shift in tonality, right? So it's not going to have a nice, smooth modulation to a different key. It's a sudden, blunt modulation. So here, right, we don't have any sort of nice movement, 1-5-1 or anything like that. It's just a sudden switch. We're suddenly in D flat major, and then bam, then we're in D major. So it's basically like a traffic accident. So another method used is free tonality. So free tonality, no conventional mode or key, clear tonal center is important. Any combination of the 12 tones of the octave may be used. So chromatic scale. Traditional function of the diatonic tones of a key based on that same tonal center is minimized or avoided entirely. So they're avoiding 1-5-1 basically, and the circle progression. And then the dominant tonic relationship of the key-centered tonality is absent. So there's no 1-5-1 and there's no circle progression. So if we look here, you see in 16.5, this piece by Hindemith, so we've got a clear tonal center of F. We keep coming back to F. Right, and then we end on F. And then we move away to B flat. Then we come back to F. Then we go to C flat, to F, to A. So there's no circle progression. And yeah, that's really it. It's avoiding circle progressions, traditional harmonic progressions. So, and you don't have to do a Roman numeral analysis. It's kind of similar to non-functional harmony. So, but the one constant is that there's a clear sort of tonal center that it keeps coming back to, right?
So 16.5 is an example of what they call free tonality. So it's got a strong pull to F. It keeps coming back to F minor. So it's going to be F to B flat, F over to C flat, F minor, finally going to A major, and ending on F flat. So again, it doesn't really have functional harmony, but it's got a strong pull to this F minor chord. So essentially, we call the tonic F and then sort of analyze around that.
So when we're dealing with harmony, we've got a few different chords. So the polychord, there are two different kinds of chords that you can have that are polychord. One is a true polychord, all right? So in this case, we've got an A major triad on the bottom, and then we've got E flat major on the top. So they're played against each other. So we don't have any common tones. So this is a true polychord, no common tones. Each chord retains a separate sound, and that's an emphasis of the polychordal effect. And now this polychord, slightly different. Since it shares two common tones, we've got A major here, so A, C sharp, E, and then here we've got a C sharp diminished chord, so C sharp, E, G. So we share two common tones. We've got our E and our C sharp. So really what it's going to sound like, it's a hidden polychord. And it sounds, the chords contain two common tones, and the tones fuse into basically it's a major minor seventh chord. But if you're analyzing Stravinsky, you're going to call it an implied polychord. But the polychordal effect is masked because it actually sounds like a major minor seventh chord. But technically, the two are separate.